Chat with Sandy and Karen. I'm Karen Jackson, and my co-host is
Sandy Bansal.
Welcome, and we are welcoming our good friend for our second episode in chat with Jacqueline Whiting. Before we go any further, is anyone hearing any echoes, or is it just me?
You fade in and out for me, but if there's no echo, and that only started when we went live.
Okay, so is that better?
Yes.
Is it echo? Okay. All right. So, yay! Welcome back.
Yay. It is so good to be back.
Karen, we can't say it. We have to add an additional bit. Our friend, celebrity.
Yes, and author. Yes.
Oh, thank you both. Thank you both. It's just fun to be back to chat with both of you. Takes me right back to Stockholm every time I see both of you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. I was listening to our podcast we did previously, and the one thing difference is last time we spoke, it was dark and horrible, and it was raining in Gothenburg. Today it's sunny. Karen, you're feeling the weather here because you've got like a lovely flowery on.
And welcome to summer, whether it's here or not.
Yeah.
It's going to be 90 degrees Fahrenheit here today. So summer has finally arrived.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would that be? That will be about 30 degrees?
About 30 Celsius. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm
jealous. I know.
It's 22 now, so it's perfect. But no sun. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. I'm not complaining. We'll get plenty of sun later, I know.
Yeah. And the school year is winding down here. Are you done already in Texas? And are you done already, Sandy?
Temple is.
Yeah, we've got one more week, and then we're done. Celebrations next Friday. But I mean, what's happening in Gothenburg this week is the city is 400 years old. So there's a lot of celebrations this week, not big ones. So they're going to celebrate in 2023. So if you can make it down to Gothenburg.
I'm all over it.
Yeah.
Wow. Quick ride from Stockholm.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Right. So Jackie, we thank you for coming back to our show, our podcast. And we really wanted to talk about the book you have just published.
Mm-hmm.
I have been, it's really good. It's so,
thank you.
It's just not full of writing. There's visuals in there. There's examples in there. And such a good, I think so. And I think Karen thinks so. Don't know about our other listeners. A really good resource to have.
Thank you.
So tell us, I mean, I know what the book is about, Karen knows, but tell us, the listeners, what is the book about?
So I mean, you know, because we all went through it together, right? That deep dive into design thinking and building a design thinking mindset when we were all together in Stockholm and working with Les Macbeth from Future Design School. And that experience was so transformative for me in every aspect of my life, not just how I thought about teaching or how I thought about learning, but you know, how I thought about problem solving in my community or problem solving in my family, how I thought about interacting with my colleagues. And that was also the point in my life when I had transitioned from the classroom into library media. And then I transitioned again from library media into instructional coaching. And that's really the root for where the conversations that I have in the book came from, because that idea of design thinking, I think for a lot of people, they think of it as a process, right? That there's steps, that it's a cycle, an iterative, reflective cycle, and there is an iterative, reflective aspect to it. But to me, it's much more of a mindset. So I like to say that design is a process and design thinking is a mindset. And when you bring the mindset and the process together, that can really be transformative in how people teach, learn, interact, and problem solve. And I was, been working with teachers on how to make their learning experiences in their classrooms more student-centered, how to shift their pedagogy so that the focus of the work and the questioning and the learning was on giving students agency over those processes and letting the teacher become the facilitator of them, but not the director of them. And what I found was in all of the conversations I was having with people, that I was really bringing all of those elements of a design thinking mindset and a design process to how I was helping teachers to unpack what was happening in their classrooms and help them to think about different questions that they could be asking students to know them better as people and as learners, to know them beyond their data, because the data is important to inform instructional decisions, but it's only a piece of the information, right? And so as we began, as I began working with teachers and they began embracing this mindset, it was really helping them make major shifts, not just little minor tweaks to what they were doing, but major shifts in how they thought about what an experience in their classroom should be like. And so that's where, everything in the book comes from. It's that, how do I really get to know the people in my learning community so that when I am making both individual and collective decisions, we're doing it in the interest of increasing people's agency over themselves as learners, whether those learners are students, adolescents, or children in a classroom, or adults who are learning and improving their pedagogy and expanding their instructional strategies.
That is so empowering. That's what I kept thinking when you were saying that, is that it gives teachers the power to design their instruction based on what their students need right then. And that's all. That's really great.
Thank you. And I wrote the book with so many different stakeholders in mind, right? To use a design terminology. I thought about students who might be indirect stakeholders, right? If their teacher's pedagogy shifts, then they are the benefactors of that, or beneficiaries of that. But I also thought about administrators who are charged with organizing professional learning for teachers according to a calendar schedule, right? And how do those experiences now become designed with the wide range of stakeholders in a school in mind, right? So frequently, as a deliverer of PD, I hear it all the time, right? I'll be working with a group of teachers, for example, CTE teachers, right? Technology education, and they'll say, oh my gosh, you actually know that we're not math teachers. Normally, we just get thrown in with the math people, and it's irrelevant to us. Or school counselors who say, oh, you're actually talking to us about the ways in which we work with kids and families. You're not just throwing us into general ed and we can't find something that's relevant to us. So I had those kinds of people in mind as I was working on the book and putting it together. And so I went out to interview a lot of people who I knew had this mindset, that is just how they navigate the world and how they navigate their schools, and let their stories illustrate how these ideas and these habits of mind, how they actually play out when you're using them with people who you live and work with. And so, it starts with personas, which are fictitious, and then moves into the real people telling their real stories. So I hope that there's something in there for people, no matter what their role in a learning community happens to be.
Now, I saw you also had a chapter about distance learning.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're probably the first one out of the cohort, or just said, right, yeah, here's my book, but let's not forget about what we're all going through, which I thought was a really good concept as well.
Thank you. And you know, that I was writing it before the school shutdowns happened, and then that put the pandemic put a pause on it, right? Because my publisher people were furloughed, and they slowed down their operations, and that gave me a moment to stop and go back and say, if this isn't going to come out until we're working our way out of the pandemic, then I can take this slow down time and use it to really talk about how is this process applicable no matter where you are and what's happening to you. And so I started really thinking about teachers who were making the necessary pedagogical shifts to keep students engaged, learning meaningfully, to continue to give them agency over their learning, regardless of the learning paradigm they were in, because it was always so fluid, right? Like we went from all in the classroom, brick and mortar, to all out. And then when we started to come back in, that circumstance was changing on a weekly, bi-weekly, if not daily basis for some people, being concurrent, being hybrid, being fully remote, trying to all be back in at school. And so this kind of a mindset that says, let's embrace the problem and not push the problem away. It's the problem is something for us to embrace, because within the problem are the resources that we need to begin to implement different ways of navigating the problem, even if it's not solving the problem. So we weren't going to solve COVID, but we could find creative and impactful and meaningful ways to continue teaching and learning in impactful ways that then we can carry through after the pandemic, when we do return to whatever the next phase of normal happens to be, right? And so it is exactly in those circumstances where that curveball comes out of left field that kind of a mindset is so important.
Absolutely. Sorry, I forgot I was muted. As always.
It has to happen at least once in every virtual conversation, doesn't it?
Yes. Oh. So do you think that, I've been thinking a lot about writing lately, and I know, of course, we always, as a writing teacher, we always encourage our students to think about the reader, think about who this is for. And it sounds like you kind of had a different emphasis midstream because of the pandemic. What was that experience like? Were you concerned at all that it might change what the outlook of the book was, and just, like your initial goal and everything? How was that as an author?
Yeah, Karen, that's so interesting, because as a coach, my concern is that we, the collective royal educational we, aren't going to find or make the space to reflect on what pandemic teaching was for us in the way that I think we really need to. Yeah. I think it's so important for learning communities, schools, that teach students of any age, for the teachers and the adults, the staff in the building, to go through a really deep reflective process on how did I learn to be a teacher during a pandemic? Because none of us, no matter what, bachelor's or master's program or educational certification program you go through, nobody practices or learns or explores how to teach in the circumstances we just taught in, which means all of us have an opportunity now to say, hang on a second, instead of thinking about how did I teach, this is an opportunity for me to think about how did I learn? And if I can engage with other adults who are also educators who went through their own version of this pandemic teaching experience, if we can engage in conversation about how we learned, that can go so far to help us to understand what it truly means to differentiate learning experiences, what it truly means to have agency over the path, the pace, the time, and the place of your learning. And then to be able to transfer that and say, how do I make sure that every student that I come in contact with during the day has that same opportunity to have agency over path, pace, time, place of learning, so that it is meaningful to them and they are getting what they need, right? And so that's really what kind of gave me that push when I was writing about that in the book, was hoping for that time and space to be made, right? Like we can't move from pandemic teaching back to the classroom, because it is going to be as jarring to go back to the classroom as it was to leave the classroom, right? Because so much has happened. We've been tested and we've triumphed and we've failed in a lot of ways. And the only way we grow from that is if we take the time to reflect upon it. And so really that's what was going through my head when I was writing, and then the pandemic happened, and then I started to incorporate those ideas into the book, how important it's going to be for us to make meaning of what we've done and why we've done it, so that we go forward bringing the best of that back into classrooms with us.
I think one of the key factors I can take away is I've been on my own as a teacher. I had no one to collaborate with. Sometimes I think I've just given Karen headaches. I'd say, what can I do? but I think it's been tough. And like you said, reflection. If I reflect at myself that my year has been this year, I've been the worst teacher this year. I felt like I haven't given what I wanted to give to the students. And, the students have done an amazing job. They've learned so much, but on their own. I just felt like usually I like to go around the classroom, see what everyone's doing, see who I can help with. And I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So your students demonstrated incredible resilience.
Oh, fantastic! Right? Yeah,
and incredible agency. And I think that's the piece for a lot of us to take away from this. When we think about, I've talked with teachers and with administrators who are concerned about students with whom they lost contact, and students whose performance by whatever metric fell below what had been typical for them. I think it's as important as it is to understand what happened to and for those students, and what choices those students made or felt were available to them. It's as important to look at ways that students thrived, and how many of those ways in which they thrived were not things that were open to them prior to the pandemic. How do we keep that open for students who found a path to fulfillment and satisfaction and learning and success?
No, definitely. I just hope it gets I don't know, more in class though. I think as a teacher we miss that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The relationships will be different, right?
Yes.
And if we take the time to make meaning of it, they will be better.
Yeah.
Different and better. And that's good.
I think it came from how do we get, as an instructional technology specialist, how do we get devices into the hands of students? The question became, how do we teach them when when they only are using what they have, using what they have already. So I think also there were a lot of creative methods used that we never even thought about before. Like so much can be done with the phone. And we talked to someone in India, and he was talking about how the country put educational coursework on the TV, because you have one. If a family only had a TV and a phone, you could have one student on the phone and one watching TV learning. And he said, and the byproduct of that was that many parents were learning because that was the family device.
Right.
So
that's so cool.
it was just so many things I never even thought about are positive things.
And that's also a piece of the equity issues around all of this that we cannot brush aside or overlook. The same device in every student's hands isn't necessarily equity. It isn't equity, right? It may be everybody has the same thing, but it's not necessarily as useful to some as it might be to others, and different students needed different things, and we were triaging, right? So we didn't have the space, the bandwidth for even being able to understand that until we began doing it. And so this is an opportunity to do better by each student according to each student's needs. And I think that's our challenge going forward. It has always been our challenge, but now it's a challenge that we will, I think, undertake. And I love the byproduct of trying to problem solve for multiple children in a household has this, extra benefit of we're providing educational content to other people that we hadn't even anticipated would then be able to access it. And that's really powerful. In my work with district leaders or school teams and even individual teachers, I kept emphasizing the lowest possible access point, right? That's the technology you want to be leveraging with your students. Something that requires nothing more than a cell phone to still fully function, right? So things like Jamboard and things like Flipgrid, there is no diminished experience for a student in their ability to digest or create and share content on those two platforms, whether they're on a desktop computer, a laptop computer, a Chromebook, an iPad, or a cell phone. They still have the robust ability to interact, create, contribute, and learn. And so those are the tools that I was recommending to people for that very reason of we don't all have the same access to connectivity or devices.
Yeah.
Also in your book, and I think it's something you also touched upon at the beginning, it was the last chapter, mindset matters. So what can you say about that?
Yeah, so I had an interaction with a teacher during the shutdown. We were a couple of months in, so that's more than a year ago now, right? And we had a mid-morning meeting scheduled, and when she dialed in, I said, "So how are you doing today?" And she said, "Today's a good day. I've only cried twice so far." And I did, whoa, let's just hit the pause button, right? Like, this is not time to be talking about Google Slides if this is how this conversation began, right? And so the whole idea of mindset is so nuanced and layered that you need to have a mindset of optimism, right? Problems are universal. Challenges are ubiquitous, no matter what we're trying to do. But if you approach them from a place of optimism, and on the other side of this problem is rich learning experiences for all of us, teachers and students, then engaging in that problem and engaging in the process of understanding it and unpacking it and beginning to understand how the people who live with the problem do live with the problem and navigate it. What solutions have people tried before? Why haven't those solutions worked? What needs do I need to understand in order to really be solving this with equity and empathy? The human growing that happens in that process is so powerful, and the connections that people build with one another when they begin to engage in problem solving in that way are really, really strong bonds. So at a time when we, particularly where I'm dialing in from today in the United States, at a time where it's so divisive, being able to approach classroom challenges, community challenges, global challenges from that kind of a perspective with the optimism that's necessary for real problem solving makes a big difference in what everyone's experience is throughout the process, not just on the other side when hopefully we're in a solution that's working for people.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I think that you've got some our listeners cannot see this, but great visuals.
Thank you.
Brains.
Thank you.
I think the template's really good. So if we wanted to give it to our students to say, okay, tell us what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I did that on purpose. I forgive me for the term I'm about to use, but I've seen it used in what I think are some pretty good texts, so I'm going to use it. For me, it's a cross between a professional text and a professional workbook, because I wanted people to engage in the processes and the exercises that I explain and outline in the book as they went, and at the same time be able to have all of those materials that they can now duplicate and use with colleagues or with students in the classroom, whether we're doing a problem solving unit in a classroom, or I'm bringing together a committee of people in my school to try to address an issue that we're having in the school. All of the tools in there are applicable in any of those situations, curricular or policy. I had said to both of you earlier that I use a lot of what's in the book in professional learning that I do, and I've been doing professional learning with some administrators, some building principals, and we did 6 sessions together. We spent 4 of those sessions on user discovery, understanding the stakeholders, and understanding the problem. And we didn't get to beginning any ideation around solutions until we were into session 5. So really, like, the crux of the work is in that building understanding of the community. So with those administrators, I used the personas at the beginning of the book, and it was very interesting to watch and listen as they were trying to unpack those personas. It was so interesting to hear that they were immediately connecting the persona they were working with a member of their faculty. That there were a couple of things in there that triggered a connection, and now they're thinking about that member of their faculty, and now they're going through the struggle of objectively understanding that member of their faculty, someone who they've known for a very, very long time, and learning to suspend whatever prejudgment they bring about that person because of interactions they've had with them, and being able to see assets and skills and talents in that person to which they'd been blinded previous, and be able to see the challenges that person faces through that person's lens, through that person's perspective, which I had multiple administrators said, can we postpone next week's session? I need another week. I want to go do more of these interviews. And that to me was the really powerful moment that they were able to see. I've been building policy, implementing policy, enforcing policy based on assumptions about people that I now know are false assumptions. And everything that I do is so much better if I actually engage in these conversations with people.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. It's helping people realize, and it kind of gives them strength and boldness. I love using personas and scenarios. I don't know, I guess because you're then you stand beside yourself and you can look at yourself and solve someone else's problem, although that person is you.
Right. Absolutely. And think about the first days of school, right? I mean, I know we're just wrapping up the year that we're in. And so we all take a deep breath, but then we're going to start to think about the fall. And think about what a school year is like if it begins with stakeholder empathy, if it begins with students interviewing one another, interviewing teachers, teachers interviewing students, teachers interviewing each other to learn about them in the ways that these kinds of tools make possible. Now, as a teacher, if I've had that kind of an exchange with each of my students and I supplement that with whatever legacy data comes along with them, I can make really powerful decisions about the resources I'm going to introduce in class, about the opportunities that I'm going to provide students for accessing that information, for showing what they know and what they can do, and much more give them much more agency over that, because I've heard from them what it is that ignites their curiosity and their passion, and what it is that they're proud of, and what it is that they want to be able to share with people. And so that's why it is student-centered learning by design, right? That's where the title came from.
So can you, I mean, you've given us an example of administrators using this. I can see the design side of using this. Can you give us other subjects, examples like English or history, just briefly, so we can let our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually worked with a social studies teacher doing this kind of work, and he had been doing work with students on a big essential question about, like, what is progress? And what is civilization, and what is community? I mean, they had these really potent essential questions. And he then posed to them a challenge that we have answered all of these questions through our own lenses and our own experiences. And if we look around the room, there's a lot of similarity in our experiences, because we've grown up together in this community and we've gone to school together for many, many, many years. And we need to stop now and acknowledge that the way in which we have understood history is limited by that. And so the challenge that he gave them was to understand progress and understand community from perspectives that were very, very different than their own. And that empowered the students to define the community that they wanted to gain understanding of, and then begin this process of finding people that they could talk to, whether it was through social media or through email conversation or in-person conversation if they could, and build profiles of real people and begin to revisit how they answered course essential questions based on this expanded perspective from other people's lived experiences, so different from their own.
Yeah, and you've given some other examples in the book, so it is really open from young age to right through the adult age, so
absolutely.
It's very resourceful.
Yeah, and the examples, they're basically North American examples, some educators in Canada, educators in the United States, talking about, Rachel Swanson talked about when she was an elementary school teacher in Chicago, and how students brought to her attention a bullying problem in the classroom, and how she just put aside regular programming to bring students into a conversation about what is bullying, what does that mean, when does it happen, why does someone engage in this behavior, how does someone become the target of this behavior, and her elementary students came up with a tremendous solution to the bullying problem in her classroom, that she said, if I had just said, oh, we have a bullying problem, here's what I'm going to do about it as the teacher, she never would have come up with anything as effective as what the students decided as a community was going to solve this problem in their classroom, right? Emma Cottier talks about how she uses this process for helping students to understand characters in literature and actually get at literary character analysis through a design process as they're reading. So many different options and possibilities for how to use it.
So this is your second book?
It is, yes.
And the first book was called News Literacy.
Yes. Yeah, and that was so it's interesting because it's, the innovator, the being a certified innovator, and that academy and that network is really a thread that connects these, because when I applied to the academy back in 2017, Stanford History Education Group, SHEG, had just released their watershed report, Civic Online Reasoning, about students, middle school, high school, college age, and their, what SHEG called, abysmal ability to understand information that they were accessing online. That informed my initial innovator project. And what I've been doing since then has kind of emanated from that. My work on media literacy resulted in me co-authoring that book, and then my continued work with news literacy and media literacy got me into a deep dive into social emotional learning and the connection between social emotional wellness and our susceptibility to disinformation that we encounter in any form. And social emotional learning got me back into the student-centered aspect of this, and then design thinking has been the umbrella that has kind of pulled all of that together. So in my mind, it's all connected. It's all part of a very logical journey.
So that means a book 3.
I'm going to enjoy that I actually can just hold a copy of book 2 for a little while. But maybe it'll be in there.
And there's an ebook format as well?
Yes, there is an ebook format. Yes.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about, Jackie, while we're here?
No, I think your questions were awesome. I loved it. This was really great. It was so good to connect with both of you. I mean, we can chat and socialize as soon as we hop on a call together. But this was a really cool kind of dive into my brain and my heart, and so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
No,
so
thank you.
yeah, I really enjoy. I just really love talking with you, and that you are so open to chat, and we can talk deep stuff. We can talk shallow stuff. It's fine, and that's what I enjoy about having you as a guest.
Thank you so much.
Karen, I sent you a text.
You sent me a text? Okay.
Oh,
I don't have my
secret
phone.
back channel communication.
I don't have my phone.
I said, Jackie's a wonderful person.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. I love being here with both of you.
It's been so fun, and I think seeing our friends grow. It's amazing.
Yeah. You know, when you were talking about being a teacher alone and not having a co-teacher, right? That's what makes stuff like this so important, is the opportunity to find those thought partners and people who will ask you really important questions that help you ask me important questions that help me reflect in more depth on something that has been a passion project for a really long time. And that's the value of these ongoing relationships that we've carried forward now since 2017 with us. So I really appreciate it.
No.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't want to end it, but I suppose we should. Jackie, you're always welcome to come back and chat with us. And thank you to our listeners. And we just enjoy bringing these conversations to you. Sandy and I hope that our listeners would join us again and share if they feel so led. We are found at @ChatWSK1 on all social media places, and also where you can get some high quality podcasts. So we thank you again, Jackie, and
My pleasure.
And hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You both as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.